LeaderBoom. I'm Anne-Marie McDougall. I'm the president and founder of LeaderBoom, and LeaderBoom is focused to provide consulting and training and coaching to individuals, leaders, communities, and organizations to help empower them to actualize their potential. And I'm so grateful to That Channel team for allowing us the time today to schedule this special interview with Eyob Naizghi. And Eyob is the executive director of MOSAIC BC that is located in the Greater Vancouver area. And I'm very delighted to have this discussion, and I appreciate Eyob taking the time out of his very busy calendar to share his wide range of knowledge and know-how with us. Let me share a little bit more about the MOSAIC team with you. MOSAIC is a registered charity serving immigrant, newcomer, and refugee communities in Greater Vancouver for the past 40 years. They're one of the largest settlement organizations in Canada, so we felt it would be wonderful to be able to share some of their best practices for settlement with refugees and newcomers to Canada in this conversation. Their vision is to empower newcomers to fully participate in Canadian society. And their mission statement is that MOSAIC delivers services and engages in community building and advocacy to facilitate meaningful participation of immigrants and refugees in Canadian society. So they're doing some really amazing and wonderful initiatives. And so I'd like to welcome Eyob to the session. Welcome Eyob to this.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. It's quite humbling with that introduction of our organization and myself. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. It's an honor to have you here. And what's very remarkable about our guest today is that he, in fact, has a refugee experience that he would like to share a little bit about himself. So he has the experience, and he's running an organization that has creates remarkable value to this country. And so we look forward to hearing more about that from you, Eyob. Thank you very much. So, Eyob, it would be very beneficial, I think, maybe if you could share a little bit about your background to start, and then we'll go more into MOSAIC, the organization. Thank you.
That will take a book to share, except I will give you the abbreviated version of myself. My name, as Anne-Marie introduced, is Eyob Naizghi. I'm originally from Eritrea, and I left Eritrea during the war, the liberation war that was waging for over 30 years against Ethiopia. Actually, I have witnessed so many atrocities, and for me, the right thing to do, like many refugees do today, is to escape from that atrocity, or the chances of you losing your life was very imminent. I think one of the things that happened, and again, I don't have the time to go to details, but I remember walking through weeks with a friend of mine from a university. We met by coincidence. We didn't plan it together. And we walked for 3 weeks to cross to the border with Sudan, which is the closest and safest place in those days. And the Sudanese were very nice people, actually, to the Eritrean and as well as Ethiopian refugees. If I may add for Sudan. In those days. This is in 1975, 76 actually. So I have lived in a refugee camp for a very short while. I did go through the support of one organization. I managed to finish my undergraduate degree at the University of Khartoum in Sudan. And did manage to find work, actually, very valuable work working with refugees, managing an agricultural project at the age of 24. I think, which was actually the most interesting work I've ever done in my life. You could see people struggling, but you could, with a very little support, you could see their resilience coming to life. And I think, my life is all about resilience. The refugee life is all about resiliency. and the will to survive and to excel in whatever you want to do. And I think that's why so many refugees in Canada do well, compared to other public figures. So that was my initial refugee life. I still call myself as a refugee after 37 years into Canada. And actually, I came as a refugee student. I was the first refugee student sponsored by WOSC, World University Service Canada, to do a graduate studies at the University of British Columbia. So I always call myself a privileged refugee. I never like to miss the refugee from my title, except I add the privilege there. So I'm a very lucky, privileged refugee to have got the opportunity to come to Canada to do graduate school at a very reasonable price. I did have to pay some of the tuition fees at some point, but it was quite a privilege. I think it was pure coincidence, actually. Although my study is in urban geography and I specialized in migration processes, particularly rural-urban migrations, it was pure coincidence that I landed a job with MOSAIC after doing about 12, 15 years of international development work, because I really felt that it was my skills, my education could be better utilized back in Africa. So I went back to Africa, actually, worked with a number of great NGOs who were doing great development work with refugees, with non-refugees, with local populations. So it was pure coincidence that I landed at MOSAIC. If you look at my background, if you look at my studies, if you look at my work experience, kind of jives very well with the work of MOSAIC, which is about empowering immigrants, refugees particularly, and in general newcomers to Canada who have language and cultural barriers.
That's fantastic.
That's a kind of the
quick summary, right? A quick summary. It's a remarkable story, and it's such a privilege to have you here as a guest. And I know that your refugee experience, that life experience, you bring that that inspiration and motivation into the work that you're doing at BC or MOSAIC in BC. And I'm just curious to know, how do you view the refugee settlement experience? How has that changed over the years from 30 years back to today? How would you view that as changing? Is it getting better or worse, or what's your view on that?
I think, we are doing, when I first joined the organization was 1993. I think, it reminded me of some of the development organizations I was involved with, which had a 70s image. I think now the organizations over the years have professionalized their services. They can use metrics to measure outcomes, impacts on people. And I think, we have developed an accountability framework for what we use from public funds. And I think, it's much better for the investment the public does on settlement and integration of newcomers. Much more better than when I started. I am very fortunate to be part of that process of revolutionizing the sector, if you may say so, and changing it to what it is. And not only me, but there are so many people, some of them here in this organization who are my colleagues, and from outside, whether it is in Toronto or the maritime regions, who are very active in making sure that this sector is vibrant and responsive to the needs of the communities that we're working. My bottom line is actually, we cannot treat immigrants and refugees as this vulnerable people who do not know how to help themselves. I think I talk about resiliency a lot, and I may have used it already. And I talk about, at Mosaic, we talk about empowering people, empowering newcomers to be full and active participants as citizens. And I think, the system, even the way government funds us, is much improved. I think they make us accountable, and we still stay accountable to our clients as well as the public. So it has significantly changed. I can't remember when I first joined what the nature of this organization was and what we have now. We are much bigger. I think when I first joined Mosaic, it was even when I took the leadership of Mosaic, it was only a 6 million organization. Now it ranges between 20 to 24 million, over 350 employees with 450 volunteers, about 14 locations in the Lower Mainland. So it's much, and I think people are taking settlement and integration of newcomers more serious. The public is interested that we have active and productive immigrants and refugees. So I think that's very, it holds you very accountable to the public. So things have changed, but for the good.
I agree. I think it's remarkable how the impact that your organization has on the community and the economy. And I love the idea that you've put metrics to each of the initiatives that you're running to demonstrate the value. And it's not only to demonstrate value, but it's to show progression in the work that you're doing and how impactful it is. And I also agree that everyone has uniqueness, unique skills, capabilities, and to be able to provide the support that's required to help these individuals, all of us, to actualize our potential helps not only the individual, the community, their families, and the country. So I love that Canada is being admired for so long for the work that they're doing. I know you're instrumental to all of that. And Eyob, the other piece that I find remarkable is your ability to collaborate not only with traditional stakeholders, but non-traditional stakeholders, government and corporations and settlement agencies and across all directions in society. Can you talk a little bit more about your ability and what inspired you? Is that just a natural ability you have to collaborate with such a diverse range of perspectives? Where did that come from?
It's hard to say, but I think, it's in my DNA as a person that, I don't pretend that I have all the answers.
Right.
I don't pretend that I can do it alone, but it's also in the DNA of the organization. Partnership, collaboration has always been part and parcel of our strategic plan. If you look at Mosaic as an organization, we strongly believe that without the systemic change, without the community building, it's in our mission statement, services alone can't be a band-aid solution. So for us to bring those systemic change, for us to bring and build communities around the organization, around the neighborhood house, we cannot do it alone. We have to be working together. We have to find the partners. And the partners are actually not necessarily immigrant and refugee service organizations. The partners are actually neighborhood house, community centers, mainstream organizations like family services and the WISE of this world, even private, to be honest with you, even private providers of social services can be a good partner. The most important and key thing that we have to always look at when we build partners is the values, the compatibility of value statements of the organization. Even private, there are good socially responsible corporations that we should not shy away from to partner and do business with. So I think in a nutshell, it is in the DNA of the organization. It is in my DNA, and I'm quite privileged to have, contributed to the making of the organization, contributed in a little bit way to the settlement and the integration of newcomers nationally, internationally, and locally. In my own small way, I'm a guy who did not shy away from stating what needs to be stated. I think, you know, transparency is also part and parcel of my DNA. If something does not feel right, and if we do not say it, we just ignore it, and it never gets solved. It just hunkers on as an issue, as a problem. I think, you know, our challenge is not a challenge. It's how do you convert those into opportunities. So yeah, partnership, collaboration. I think, you know, we've done an amazing work. You know, we did a project actually in partnership with neighborhood houses and mainstream small organization, big organization. You know, we developed the first partnership toolkit was developed in 1997, and it was in collaboration with another mainstream organization. So we knew all along, I think, you know, we have to do more partnership, but we also have to share that concept of partnership that locally, nationally, and provincially. In fact, the partnership toolkit, which is still in our website, is used globally. And I remember talking to African development workers, some of them Africans, some of them Africanists, here in Vancouver, because they were so interested about what partnership means, how do you identify partners, and how do you put it on the ground. I think, you know, that, you know, those are the key elements. So I think collaboration and partnership is the way to go for the future. We will stay, and except as the world gets more and more complicated, we may have to develop new tools to be able to face those challenges.
Certainly, absolutely, and I agree with you that the collaborative and inclusive focus is a wonderful and efficient framework in terms of being able to bring unique ideas to the table, which oftentimes generates very powerful outcomes, right? And it's a very positive and strong focus to have behind the team who's required to execute and to deliver on these tough and complex initiatives. So, also bringing these skill sets into youth and the school systems, just out of curiosity, is that something that you do? Do you spend time in the school systems teaching development best practices and how to build strong communities and so on, which is so required in today's likely curriculum?
Oh, well, you know, it says nowadays the entering the school system is getting more and more difficult. Okay. However, in the past, we have partnered with the schools, particularly in Vancouver, and it was more about telling the story of grandparents, for example, using that grandparent story, that we all come from different places, and we all reside in this earth, in this part of the earth called Vancouver. And it's about bringing social cohesion and awareness creation around diversity, around people's backgrounds. It was actually one of the projects we did, with very little resources, but very resourceful teachers and parents and students. It was marvelous. So we do work when opportunities arise with schools. We do work with universities. We do challenge universities and elementary and high schools to acknowledge diversity, to look at diversity as as an opportunity for growth, and it's good for society, and it's our reality anyway. So I think it's we have one project actually with one school where we are the providers of the settlement support to the students as well as the parents. And very recently we did, in fact it's on our website, we did a Halloween theme activity with the schools. We didn't only do it with the immigrant and refugee students, we did it with the whole school. And we brought in partners from the private sector, such as the companies that retail food items and what have you. And it was quite a great activity to build communities and to build the spirit of togetherness. And it was quite fascinating to actually watch this Syrian refugees getting out with these costumes, and I'm quite sure there is an element of some kind of a Halloween somewhere in every part of the world, but they were out and they did enjoy it quite tremendously.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know you have a number of youth programs, maybe 4 or 5, and just for the benefit of the audience, who may not be familiar with the settlement process and what that actually looks like, I know that across Canada there are communities of families who are rallying around refugees and newcomers to provide them with support, and I find it to be very, powerful model. But could you talk a little bit just about the basics about settlement, maybe 3 or 4 points on settlement and what that means, and then we'll get into maybe a little bit of dialogue on youth.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. We have to contextualize whatever programs we have within the settlement and integration processes. And I think I'm sure your audience, yourself, your technicians have traveled outside of Canada, outside your country, even outside of your hometown. The first trip you did to probably to Toronto or somewhere else in a big city, it does become overwhelming. It is new experience, and you only, if you add the language and the culture barrier to that, now assume yourself you're going overseas to a different culture, different climate, and different language. You can assume that you will have some aha moment in terms of your readjustment to be able to even enjoy your trip for 2 weeks or a week. So it is within that context I try to visualize the settlement and integration processes. So throughout Canada, there are 2 streams of support that the federal government provides. I'll also talk about the other creative ways particular MOSAIC has evolved over the years. One is the linguistically and culturally competent way of actually supporting people in their initial arrival, which is providing them information on simple things as how do you go about finding housing, how do you go about opening your bank account, how do you have you put your MSP together, compiling those basic information. Which schools what is the school system that we have here? How do you register your kid into those are basic information provision. And it doesn't mean that the person arrives today and that person would go to an organization, settlement organization, and get those services. Actually, it's a continuous process. It's a continuous process, and the federal government funds those programs up to 3 years. But over the years, the basics, once the basic is met, then there are other issues that arise that require the support of our settlement and integration workers. They provide services in the first language, and most of the time they are from the same culture or the same country, and they have gone through the same experience, just like myself, of settling and integrating into the Canadian society. The other stream is the English language learning, which is what we call the LINK, language instruction for newcomers. And this goes, it depends from province to province, but in the Vancouver area or in BC, I think we have up to level 6 or 7, English learning. By the 6 and 7 are more geared towards workplace English, or towards specific professions, and I think they are all this support actually expedite the support and the settlement and integration of the individuals or newcomers who come to Canada. Of course, there are more complicated issues that our staff we deal with. And some of them are supported by the provincial governments. For example, we have domestic violence prevention programs at MOSAIC, which we had. Actually, it's one of the few organizations, in fact, the only organization I know in BC that does those domestic violence preventions in specific languages in the community. So, and there are, one of the uniqueness of MOSAIC as part of the settlement, which is not supported by IRC to that extent, is supporting women and children. Again, these are programs that, that's around parenting. It's around healthy living. It's around healthy relationship. It's all about preparing these young mothers and parents. In fact, we did had a program for fathers. It didn't survive because of funding, but it was quite a creative way of supporting, because you have to look at the people who are coming to Canada. Most of us are from third world countries, including, even if you consider China, India, Philippines, and the African diaspora, as well as South American countries. Those are the major contributors to our immigration. And the parenting there and the parenting here could be very different. And we don't want them to run into difficulties with the justice system unnecessarily. So it's all about preparing people to get used to living in Canada, to know your rights, to know your responsibilities, to give back to community, to share with your neighbors. So those are some of the things. In fact, if you look at our English language training, they're not necessarily learning English for the English sake. They're learning English so that, in fact, it's referred to as settlement English training. We do have other programs funded, some of it by the provincial government, some of it by the federal government. The province manages the EI fund from the federal government to run employment programs, and MOSAIC is one of the, actually it's the only immigrant and refugee serving organization that runs a center in the Lower Mainland. And one piece of that is actually IT training for youth. So we believe in diversification of our programs and services for sustainability of the organization. And as a result, we have done very well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for that explanation. I think that's really helpful to the audience who wants to learn more about the settlement process and perhaps even how they might be able to support you and other agencies across Canada who are working with newcomers and helping to ease that culture shock coming into a new country. And after having had that experience, there's multiple dimensions to that process of adjustment, I'm sure. And whatever we can do to help as a country and a community, you know, is important. And Canada is a large country. Of course, we have an aging demographic now in our population. I think the median age is 44 or so, and certainly welcoming more newcomers to Canada is a big part of the federal government's agenda, and increasing the size of newcomers to our country, which is fantastic. And what would you say, Eyob, to other organizations around the country that are having to maybe put more structure to some of their initiatives to get ready to prepare for increase in size in the settlement process or settlement products and services that they're offering? What would you say is, what are you doing at MOSAIC that you can share as a best practice across the country for listeners who may be also preparing to support in that regard?
Yeah, I think we have to realize, you're right. Immigration is one of the Canadian pillars of nation building. We cannot only see it, oh, we are so compassionate, we are so kind, so we bring all this immigrants. I think you hit it on the nail when you said we have an Asian demographic. We have an aging population. Our demographic is not in good shape. So is the Europeans, so is the Australians, so is the Americans. So we have to realize that we have, in a competitive world, to attract immigrants into this country. I think we will depend on immigration to supplement the shortage of labor force in the coming years, as early as 2020. There are ample evidence to demonstrate to that. In terms of there are a number of ways. I think we didn't get a chance to talk about the youth programming that MOSAIC carries on. I think some of the programs we are carrying around the Lower Mainland, whether you look at the Wraparound program, which is a partnership with the schools, the different schools in Vancouver, as well as the Vancouver Police Department or the City of Vancouver, to prevent harm or to prevent people from going the wrong way is something I like to mention. I think you have to understand that particularly people who come somewhere around the 13, 14 age category go through a very, very rough time adjusting and settling in this part of the world, and the chances of them slipping into unnecessary activities is significant. Hence, we have the Wraparound, we have the Move It Ahead project, which is all about empowering them, supporting them, whether it is through the school, whether it is individually, for a number of years, so that they are on the right track to settling and adjusting and having a healthy relationship within their family, within the school system, and what have you. In terms of sharing on the with others, I think we have to realize that the world is changing significantly. So sometimes it hurts me to see. It's almost been over 40 years since I became a refugee. And, if I read the reports now, we have over 65 million people displaced. Most of them refugees in other countries, some of them displaced in their own countries. And I think, one of the things that I like to say is, as citizens, we have a responsibility to stay engaged at this level. It doesn't mean all of us would be politicians. It doesn't mean all of us would be the CEOs of big companies and influence policymakers. at every level, we are leaders in our own way, and we can contribute. We have to stay engaged for making Canada a welcoming country. But one of the things that you mentioned was that Canada has increased the number of immigrants. Actually, yes, and I think by 2020 we do expect over 340,000 refugees, which is a significant increase from the
240,000 now.
265,000 over the last 10 years. So, I think those are, but the number of refugees we have not increased, or the increase is insignificant. I think Canada has an opportunity to play a leadership role in, again, enhancing our capacity. We have a huge country here. We have a healthy economy, and refugees are actually are equally economic contributors to a country. Anywhere they stay, they don't rely on social safety net as such. They do go work. They are good contributors. So we need to talk about that. So we need also, since I think, my last comment would be around, how could you support organizations like MOSAIC? I think, one of our, one of my baby projects these days is the refugee sponsorship group, and we're always looking for sponsors and donors to contribute towards sponsoring families from different parts of the world, not only Syria, but so many African countries and Asian countries. So I think there are a lot of ways of participating and stay engaging with organizations such as MOSAIC. It just takes going to our website, www.mosaicbc.org. You could find so many good information, so many ways you can participate and make an impact on our communities.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes, you mentioned that you have 450 volunteers or so that are supporting your organization. So certainly reaching out. I know as students even and universities or communities can reach out to you to offer your support, which would be fantastic. Eyob, I have one other quick question. Do you have time?
Sure.
Yeah, it's around youth. In the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area, our youth unemployment, these are individuals 14 to say 24 years of age, is ranging between 15 to 20%, which is really high for such a strong city like Toronto, where we have, a lot of highly educated populations, and a lot of our headquarters of our corporations are located in Toronto. And, we try to understand why that's happening. And certainly there is a skills gap happening in terms of what the economy needs and what we're teaching in higher education. So that's commonly discussed in our circles, in both the news circles, news media, and as well as leadership meetings. But what do you experience in that regard in Vancouver? What is the unemployment rate for youth in Vancouver, and how are you managing that, out of curiosity?
Well, I don't have the exact stats on youth unemployment. I have 3 youth in my house, fortunately, but they are struggling. Although they found jobs, they're also struggling. They are struggling between their expectation and what society could give them. So I think that there is an element of that. I even notice in my own house. I noticed the same thing in our organization. We have a number of young people who have recently joined the organization, and the organization is struggling with trying to understand this new generation. I think it was just my advice to a lot of organizations and companies and governments is there is a lot of vibrancy within these young people, except that we need to know, we need to learn, we need from them how to harness that vibrancy, that energy, that creativity, that innovation going forward. I think the youth unemployment in BC is no different than the youth unemployment in the rest of the country. We have a challenge of creating jobs for these people, and these people have different attitude towards work, different attitude to what they like to do. And I think, as a society, as a country, we need to close that gap of appreciating youth and what they could do and how they are going to be working going forward. In my organization, we definitely struggle with that. We are always, but we never stop from asking the question, what is it that they want, and how could we, and we try different things of meeting their needs. But I think, this is a challenge. I think, those are challenges we can grow with, we can learn. It's part of the growing pain of changing generation. Right. But I think, it is about, but the challenge we have is unemployment. And as employers, we have to be willing to give them the opportunity to work, particularly the big employers who run big companies or governments. I think that we have to create employment. We have to develop a strategy of on youth employment. I remember in the 80s there was a youth strategy, youth employment strategy that was being talked about. That's when I was a graduate student looking for part-time jobs. So I think we need to go to the basics, which is about making it a priority at the national level as well as at the provincial and municipal level for youth employment. I think it is probably I sound very selfish because I have 3 youth people, but they're working. But I think as a nation we need to make it as a priority. It's a great opportunity. We have invested on these people, through their university education, through their high school education. They are good citizens, and we need to harness that. And one way of doing it is we need to develop a youth employment strategy.
I love that idea. Thank you for sharing your views on that the youth strategy. And I agree. I think they're incredibly powerful group youth population that we need to accelerate into the economy somehow in meaningful ways that will help generate good value for the country, and not lose sight of that. And there's a lot of willingness on their side also to actualize their potential. So that's fantastic. And it only seemed, it was a couple of years ago that I had the privilege of meeting you, Eyob, in Vancouver, and I know that a client of mine and I were sitting in your office and we could have talked to you for hours, and I could still go on today. And I know you're a living library of information. You're an incredible person, and it's such a privilege to have you in this discussion and sharing your best practices with people, with viewers today. And I appreciate your time so much. And I wish you and your team at MOSAIC continued success, and congratulations on the incredible work that you're doing. I know you're a very humble organization, and it's important that we showcase the work that you're doing so that we can learn from it across the country. I also wanted to highlight that, and I'll just put up in front of me, your Welcoming Communities Collaborative Model for Vancouver, Suggestions for a Blueprint, that was created in 2014. I know that you were key leader on this project, and I'm just showcasing it right now in front of the camera, Eyob, because this can be accessed online for anybody who's looking for a collaborative model or framework to work from in their organization or in their government or what have you. This is a fantastic booklet. It's loaded with information, so I just wanted to also showcase that, Eyob. So
Thank you very much.
Now, but you'll see the tape. You'll see it in the tape. And any final closing comments, Eyob, before we sign off?
Oh, Anne-Marie, this has been a great opportunity, and thank you for offering MOSAIC and myself the opportunity to tell our story. I think, the more we tell our story, the more we share our knowledge, the more we share our experiences, the better society we create. I think, the work you're doing through your company to share the leadership experience of so many people and organizations, the best practices that that all of us bring to the table. That's in itself is a very collaborative approach to building organizations, building communities. So I really want to congratulate you for the work you're doing. Nationally, I think technology is quite a marvelous thing sometimes. Most of the time, sometimes it can be counterproductive if some people.
And, Eyob, I wanted to mention that really the inspiration for doing these tapings came from some of a lot of the training that we're doing with newcomers to Canada. Actually, I had a session this morning with a group of Women's Development Council, 15 newcomers to Canada, and their children were actually sitting in the session too, and we were talking about how they can feel more empowered, and they were doing public speaking exercises, and we were talking about leadership, and it was remarkable the skills that they bring to the table, and certainly it's been a privilege to work with these groups over the past couple of years, and it's really been an inspiration, and that's really been the catalyst for these discussions and bringing you incredible people on to discuss. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing to help in any way that we can to bring these communities together and build a powerful country and showcase us as, the country as a best practice for the world to learn from as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Your team's incredible. They sent me all kinds of information. They're very proud of you. I just want you to know. If you don't know already.
I love my team. Yes. Thank you very much, technicians.
Thank you so much. We'll send you a copy of this in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day, you. Thank you to the audience as well. Chris, did we have an opportunity to showcase that photo of the young youth that they're working with in MOSAIC? Okay, excellent. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful video. Please reach out to the MOSAIC BC team if you have any questions. They're just an amazing team. They're sizable, they're huge, and they're making a great contribution. And so thank you for joining us today. Bye. Have a wonderful rest of the day.